What is this? This is an olive tree. If you've never seen one, this is an olive tree, and a beautiful one at that. A couple 1,000-year-old olive tree that you're looking at right there. The olive tree picture. What is the olive tree? Romans chapter 11 is all about the olive tree. It's pointing to Jeremiah chapter 11 is what he's quoting from. Speaking about his people Israel as a whole, all 12 tribes in that context. The Lord called your name green olive tree, lovely and of good fruit, with the noise of a great tumult. He has kindled fire on it, and its branches are broken. And guess how many pieces it was broken into? Two. 2 pieces it was broken into. Let's continue. We'll come back to that. So now we've got this on this side. This is called, on the left, is the cultivated olive tree. And can I just say, maybe on the one on the right that looks like a mohawk, can we just say maybe that's a wild olive tree? 2 olive trees, one cultivated, one wild. In the end days, the 2 will become one. Grafted into what? Romans chapter 11, verse 24. Everybody knows this verse if you know your Bible at all. For you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted contrary into the cultivated olive tree. How much more will these who are natural branches of the cultivated olive tree be grafted into their own olive tree? Bottom line, we have a wild olive tree and a cultivated olive tree. It is impossible for these to be pagan Gentiles, because you can't be a pagan Gentile and be an olive tree of any kind, because the Bible defines the olive tree as Israel. And yet, if that's the case, then the wild olive tree, which is quoted from the Tanakh as the northern kingdom, would become wild. That's what it says. Then these aren't pagan Gentiles that Paul is bringing in. These are Israelite, scattered, dispersed sheep that the Messiah is looking for. Back to Romans chapter 11. For I do not desire, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own opinion. Mystery, by the way, that blindness in part has happened to Israel, speaking of the local Israel that day in context, the only Israel that existed, the house of Judah, until the fullness of the Gentiles comes in. I told you I would come back to this verse. Do you think that Paul is just making this up, stroke of genius? He's quoting from the Tanakh. The blessing that went on Ephraim, the fullness of the the fullness of the Gentiles. This is what he's talking about. The northern kingdom coming home. Until they all come home, this is what he's talking about. Continuing, and so all Israel will be saved. How many, like me, have always thought at some point, all those Jewish people will finally understand and they'll all get saved? Because we've defined Israel as the Jewish people. But the reality is that it's all Israel, ladies and gentlemen. All 12 tribes will eventually come back. That's what he's talking about. When the fullness of the Gentiles comes home, all Israel will be saved. The deliverer will come out of Zion, and he'll turn away ungodliness from Jacob. Right there, we know he's talking about the house of Israel, because that's what they were called. For this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. What's the word sin? How many know what the word sin means? 1 John chapter 3, verse 4 says this, and sin is the transgression of the law. We have a problem if we get rid of the law. Then everyone does what's ever right in their own eyes. And that's where we're all today. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11, verse 24 says, therefore remember that you once Gentiles in the flesh, out of covenant, that's what it means, who were called uncircumcision by what is called circumcision, the southern kingdom, made in the hands by the flesh, that at that time you were without the Messiah, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. Watch this. But now in the Messiah Yeshua, you were once far off, have now been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. For he himself is our peace, who has made both one. What's he talking about? The one new man that everyone's been trying to figure out, and theological books for thousands of years have been trying to figure out what's the one new man. The mistake that we make in our theologians' seminary societies is we don't read the front of the book. And I'm included in that. When he makes both one, the two houses of Israel is clearly what he's talking about. Broken down the middle wall of separation.